There we go. I'm just going to run through who AirTAP is if you are unfamiliar with our services. There we go. Okay, so again, everyone, welcome. We're so excited that you're here today. This workshop is a part of our spring education series for 2001. So this workshop series is sponsored by MnDOT's Office of Aeronautics and administered by the Airport Technical Assistance Program, also known as AirTAP. We are located at the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota. So AirTAP began in 2000. It was the first of its kind in the nation, offering practical yet specialized training and resources across the state for those who operate, maintain, and administer Minnesota's public use airports. Minnesota's general aviation personnel across the state have had access to targeted information and training to reduce costs and improve the safety, quality, and the overall efficiency of airport operations. AirTAP also helps airport staff build a community network for exchanging best practices and learning from one another. So AirTAP provides 4 major service categories. One is our education and training. So in addition to this education series we've been putting on, we also offer a fall Airports 101 series. And we also help put together the annual airport conference that's always happens in the spring. We also provide technical assistance, access to experts, and we have resources and printed materials on our website. Some of the materials include a quarterly newsletter and targeted guidebooks. So as I mentioned earlier, this is one part of an 8-part series. So all the previous ones, except the custom zoning overview, they are available for viewing on our website. And we have 2 more upcoming, one next week on Tuesday, April 27th, focusing on airport lighting. And then on May 6th is understanding lease agreements. As I mentioned, these recordings are available on our website, airtap.umn.edu. And if you are new to Zoom meeting platform, along the bottom, you have a black ribbon. So along the left-hand side is the mute button. Please stay muted throughout the presentation, but you can unmute yourself if you'd like to have a back and forth conversation with Rick. Also, there is the video. You can definitely share your video when we aren't presenting, since you can see everyone. Otherwise, during the presentation, you just keep your video off. Again, you can see all the participants who are attending today. And here's the chat. The chat feature is where we want you to enter questions. We will be answering them at the most appropriate time, and definitely at the end, we'll be capturing all the questions. So as you think of them, please just enter them. As I said, we will get to them. There's the green share screen. It is active for everyone, but you won't need to share your screen at this time. It is being recorded, and feel free to use the reaction icons at the end to praise Rick and his great presentation. So right now, I'm going to be handing it over to Melissa Underwood. She is our moderator for today's session. Melissa?
Thanks, Catherine. My name is Melissa Underwood. I'm an aviation planner with SEH, and as Catherine mentioned, I'll be moderating this session today. I'd like to thank Rick Browning for presenting today. Rick is the manager of aviation safety and enforcement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation Office of Aeronautics. He has a degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Minnesota, is a retired naval aviator who flew both airplanes and helicopters for the U.S. Navy and has worked at MnDOT Aeronautics for more than 30 years. And with that, I will turn it over to Rick to begin his presentation. If you have questions, as Catherine mentioned, go ahead and throw them in the chat box and I can help keep an eye on that and ask Rick questions throughout his presentation as well. So thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Melissa. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Oh, very good. All right, so today we're going to talk about minimum standards, and I just want to say that this presentation has been tailored toward smaller airports. So it's meant for non-towered airports, it's meant for non-commercial service airports, Certainly as airports grow in size, they become more complicated. And they probably need a more complicated version of minimum standards to reflect that. So we focused our efforts in minimum standards towards those airports who don't have those special needs. There are lots of documents you need for managing an airport. So if you're talking about aircraft operating at the airport, that's pretty much taken care of by the FAA. They have standards for traffic patterns and communications, and that's all available, and pilots learn about that in their training. So hopefully everyone is playing nice at the airport. You also need these other documents: an emergency action plan. You need leases, airport rules and regulations, and minimum standards. So what are these all about? Well, an emergency action plan is more about just an aircraft crash. It addresses how the airport will handle natural disasters like tornadoes, bomb incidents, hazardous material incidents, fires, if you have a hangar fire, power failures, and missing aircraft. So that is a great document to have, and there are resources to help with that on our website as well. And then leases. There's lots of different types of leases. So you can have agricultural leases for people to farm airport property that's not needed to be used for runways. We keep a lot of clear area around the airport, and so you can have a lease for that. You can have hangar leases. You can have ground leases for. Oh, that's not wrong. It shouldn't say. Yep, that's right. It says tenant-owned hangars. So if someone wants to build a hangar on your airport, then you have they don't buy the property from you. They just get a ground lease. And there's aviation business leases, and then there's other business leases like your car rentals and your restaurants and things like that. So you have a number of different leases, and you want to make sure that they specify what activities are allowed or prohibited. I think you're going to talk about leases in an upcoming session, so maybe we'll just leave it at that. What do you think? Is that good enough?
Yep, that sounds good. We are talking about that in a May session.
All right, very good. Airport rules and regulations. This is one we haven't focused on a lot, and yet it is important. So airport rules and regulations can cover all of these things. I had a call yesterday from somebody that said they had someone wanted to fly a powered parachute on their airport, and they didn't think it was appropriate. So how did they communicate to people what is allowed and what isn't? If they wanted to ban the operation of the powered parachute at the airport, I would think it would go into airport rules and regulations. This is also where, somebody puts a airplane on your ramp and leaves it there. How long can it sit there before you want to do something about that? I know they're not fun to have to plow snow around. So certainly before winter comes, but you could cover that kind of thing in your airport rules and regulations. All right, so there's so much more to that, but maybe that's a next year session for AirTAP. Today we're going to talk about airport minimum standards, and I don't know where I got this, some document somewhere that says that they are the standards relevant to proposed aeronautical activity, and they should be applied objectively and uniformly, and they affect aeronautical service providers. And if you don't apply them properly, you could have a violation of the prohibition against exclusive rights or a finding of unjust economic discrimination. boy, it sounds like FAA writing. I'll bet that's where I got that. A lot of big terms in that. Don't worry about it. We're going to talk a lot more about it as we go. So a little more down to understandable things. The minimum standards are standards for running a business on the airport. Not everybody will ask. Sometimes you don't want people to operate a business on your airport. Sometimes the business is okay, but yeah, the person might not be right. And sometimes the space is not consistent with the business. So maybe some examples. We had an airport out in Western Minnesota. One of their claims to fame is their pristine lake that they had there. And there was an operator. They were concerned that an operator would want to come in and do aerial application, and they thought it might negatively impact their lake. Well, you can control that by setting appropriate minimum standards. You can't keep people from operating at your public airport because when you make it a public airport, you're saying that you will accept all aeronautical activities. So aerial application is an aviation activity. And so you can control it by establishing minimum standards that, you know, are strict enough that you keep people who would operate poorly from being able to operate on your airport. You might say, if you want to do aerial application on our airport, you need to have a containment pad that is 100 by 100 with 4 inches of concrete and a drainage system. Certainly that is going to discourage almost everyone from coming to do aerial application at your airport. And that allows you to have control where at the same time you are not restricting any one person, but you're setting a standard for the airport. We had another airport that they lost their fixed-based operator, and they really wanted to get a new one, and they had a gentleman come, and he was proposing to do all kinds of things at the airport, and they were rather excited about it. But through the investigation, we found out that this gentleman had made those kind of claims at a number of airports previously, and turns out he didn't ever stay very long. And in most cases, the community ended up losing money through his operations. So, you know, you need a process to vet someone who's coming in that wants to do business at your airport. And the minimum standards is where you'd find that. And so the rest of the stuff we'll just talk about as we go. So you need that process for someone to open up business at the airport. How do you get to yes? How do you get to no? You need to have some objective criteria that you're using that will help you to make that decision. Minimum standards is that. How long will you take to reach a decision? We had an airport, and someone wanted to do business there. They took it to their council. It took them about 60 days to respond. Well, if you've got someone who is maybe looking at a number of airports in your area, is a 60-day response time reasonable? You know, and then will you make the response in a objective manner if you don't have objective criteria to decide by? And you may have to end up defending that decision. We had another airport where a gentleman wanted to operate in wanted to operate a business in a hangar, and the city said no. They'd had enough experience with this gentleman. They knew it wasn't going to work out very well, but he complained. And when I went to visit him, I was like the the fourth agency to visit him, responding to the complaints of this individual. So a minimum standards would give you the backup to defend your decision if you choose to say no to someone. And then there's always to worry about what if you don't get asked? What if someone just decides to operate a business and they didn't tell you they were going to do it? How do you stop that? Well, if you have minimum standards, you can apply those and make them stop operating that type of business on your airport. So lots of big words, aeronautical activity. This is a great thing to refer to. This definition talks about what an aeronautical activity is. It doesn't include non-aeronautical activities such as restaurants or car rental or parking concessions, that kind of thing. So those are not included in your minimum standards. Non-aeronautical activities would be covered elsewhere, probably in leases, I would think. A fixed-base operator. Fixed-base operator is someone who does multiple services on the airport. It normally includes fueling and hangaring and aircraft moving. It may include aircraft maintenance, aircraft rental, flight instruction, but not necessarily all of those things. A fixed-base operator is normally where transient pilots go to park their aircraft and get services at the airport. So here's an example. Here's St. Paul Downtown Airport. And St. Paul Downtown actually has room for 3 fixed-based operators. On the upper left is St. Paul Flight Center, where we base our Bonanzas. On the bottom left is Signature Flight Support, where we base our King Airs. And then there's another FBO on the right side, and I don't think anybody's in there right now, but we used to base there too. I think I've operated out of just about every place you can operate on St. Paul. Well, I haven't operated from the guard hangar yet. They don't seem to welcome me as much as, you know, the other fixed-based operators on the field. So the point is, you know, these are, you can see they have significant space to operate on the ramp. They have places to park airplanes. They have places to hangar airplanes. And then they also provide fueling services. So that's an example of a fixed-based operator. And you want them positioned there on the ramp where people can find them easily when they land at the airport. Specialized aviation service operator, SASO. These are things like if people doing flight training might be a SASO, an airframe and power plant repair facility. Bulldog does engines, Maxwell does propellers. You know, they're focused on one particular aspect of it, and so they are a specialized operator, and they generally don't need to be as high profile. They don't need to be on the center of the ramp all the time. They might be tucked back off to the side a little bit, but they're also a valid business operator to be covered by your minimum standards. So when we do our minimum standards document, it's like 40-some pages, and we go through each service individually. And so 40 pages seems like a lot. People will say, oh, I don't want to create a 40-page document. It's going to be hours and hours of work, and then no one's going to understand it, and it's just going to sit on a shelf. But really, it's not all that complicated. You can see here in the headings that We've got their qualifications, minimum area, personnel, equipment, hours of operation, and insurance. And basically, those 40 pages are taking each operation and allowing you to set specifics for each of these 6 headings. So in a lot of cases, they're all going to be the same. And so it really can be done very quickly to create this document. 40 some pages is still 40 some pages though. So where should an FBO be located? We've talked a little bit about that. This is Malacca, and you can see where the fuel is located and the runway. So you want your FBO to be located where it can see the field. And this is where the minimum standards start to come into play with airport design. When you are looking at a ramp design, Melissa, you have to look at what services the airport may have, and do they have the ramp space to support that. So, you know, when you're doing the your planning and creating your master plan, I imagine you talk a bit about what the goals are for the airport in the way of supporting businesses, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. And the type of airplanes that they would anticipate coming to use their facility.
Yep. Yep. You can see Malacca had a parachute operator down in the lower left there, tucked back on a taxiway, and that really wasn't, in our estimation, a great place for them. Not so much about the operation itself, about their interaction with the public. You can see up at the very top is the parking lot for the airport, and so people would come if they were going to go on take a parachute drop. They would have to either park in that parking lot and then walk around and try and find this hangar, or they would be driving in the operating area where aircraft are operating. And that's something we really only want people who understand what's going on at the airport to be doing. So a parachute operation, you'd want that to be located somewhere closer to the parking lot where they'd have access to the people who drive up to the airport. They'd see them right away. They'd be able to walk from the parking lot, wouldn't have to get out on a taxiway to get there, to take their ride halfway, their halfway aircraft ride. They only go up, they come down another way. Okay. So, yeah, you want to think about all those things. Charter operations, where would you locate those? Pilot training, aircraft rental, all of these things. So when you're thinking about an airport layout, you have to kind of consider those things. Then you may not have room on your airport for some activities, and that's just fine. But if you really want to support an activity, you have to think about it in the planning of your airport. Exclusive rights. The FAA does not allow sponsors to grant exclusive rights on federally obligated airports. Airports can restrict the number of operators based on safety and efficiency. So again, we're talking about what kind of physical room you have for the operators. And you can make a case that, hey, we don't have enough room to support 2 FBOs on our airport. So we're only going to have 1. Unfortunately, in this day and age, it seems more like it's hard to even get 1 FBO to base at an airport. An airport cannot put restrictions on self-service. So a SASO could bring airport on the, and anyone, even a private aircraft owner can bring fuel onto the airport to service their aircraft. They can't sell to others, and they have to comply with the standards. So you don't want 5-gallon cans of gas stored in an aircraft hangar because it's a fire hazard. You do have the right as the airport sponsor to provide an exclusive service, and the one that we see most often is self-service fuel pumps. You could, and Range Regional did for a while. I think they might still provide an exclusive service for fueling, where they operate the fuel trucks and they do all the servicing of aircraft that come to the airport. The thing here is they've got to be employees. You can't run it through a management contract. And so you want to make sure that if you choose to do that, you're doing it appropriately. So you can't prevent an aerial applicator from bringing their fuel on the field, but you can charge them a flowage fee. And you've got to think about how they're going to store that. You should have some rules and regulations for how they store not only fuel they bring on the field, but their chemicals for their operations. Some airports own all their own hangars, and others don't own any hangars and just provide land leases. So there's a mix, and then there's some airports that have both. Some hangars are appropriate for business, others are not. So you have to look at location, size, and facilities. And again, this goes back to the planning of the airport. You want to make sure that you don't tuck a business down in with a bunch of tenants and then have the people who are renting hangars from you be disrupted by people coming and going to that business, parking cars, walking around on the ramp, things like that. Here's an example of an airport. This is the Wilmer Airport, one of the last airports we built, one of the newest ones, I should say. Hopefully it's not the last one we build. And you can see how they have a ramp space. That big concrete area out there is wonderful. They've got an FBO positioned on the ramp. And you can see they've left open an area for that ramp to expand. If there are future businesses that come in, they can expand that ramp out and build to suit the business. So they're positioned well for the future. You can see they've got a number of hangars at the bottom. These are tenant hangars where they're built by the hangar owner. And then you can see the T hangars off to the upper left. And these are airport-owned hangars that they then rent out to the people who want to store their aircraft at the Wilmer Airport. So a really nice design. It's really great when you have a clean sheet to work with, isn't it, Melissa?
Yes, that helps a lot.
Not
that would be
always
ideal all the time, right?
Yeah, not always the case. As you can see here, here's Maple Lake, and they're an old airport, been around a long time, and they're totally built out. It might look like you could expand the ramp out to the left side, but that's a really steep grade off the left side of the ramp, and really not much room to work with. They're tucked tight in against the runway, so they can't expand anywhere be closer to the runway. And of course, you can see they're right up against the road. And then there's the farm fields off to the right-hand side. Not much you can do to expand. So if you were doing minimum standards for the Maple Lake Airport, you'd have to recognize that, there's a lot of businesses that wouldn't fit on the Maple Lake Airport in its current situation. there's always hope for the future. You know, you can buy that farm field and have room for expanding further off to the right-hand side of the screen. And so, you know, when they talk about their plans, they want to talk about that. Transient operations. So here we're talking, the one we see most often is an aerial applicator coming in to operate at an airport. And you've got to think about, you know, how do I need to control that? Probably somewhat. You don't want someone coming in. I landed at one airport one time and walked into the arrival departure building, and the operator had stuff spread out all over there. Had all their paperwork and their maps and everything. And it looked like I'd walked into a business instead of the arrival departure building. They'd taken over the building. I've landed other places, and the aerial applicator had taken over the ramp. There was no place for me to park the aircraft that wasn't in the way of their operations. And so that is kind of hard, and you've got to think about that. A lot of times when I'm looking at ALP, Airport Layout Plan for Review, I'm asking the question, what are you going to do when you have an airport operator or a transient operator come in? Where are they going to be able to set up? And if you don't have the space, well, then maybe your minimum standards addresses that. So you do want to make sure that when a transient operator comes in, that your airport rules, your minimum standards requires them to talk with the airport. Businesses on an airport are a way to generate revenue for the airport. And so you should be charging them something for allowing them the use of the airport as a transient operator. This is really true in places where you might have a based aerial applicator. If one comes in as a transient, how do you keep a level playing field for those two operations? That's clearly something you want to think about ahead of time, have conversations with your base tenant, and then come to an agreement that you can put in your minimum standards so that everyone understands what's required of the transient, and the base tenant feels comfortable with it. What services should be included? There are no commercial operators at the airport. What operations should be included in the airport minimum standards? That's why it's 40-some pages, because it's really hard to predict the future. Elbow Lake's a great example. Elbow Lake was a nice little grass strip, northwest Minnesota, and they got a new commercial operator. Joe LaRue does aircraft maintenance, a great guy. I think he's from the area, so he wanted to come back and settle down, and he really did a nice job of bringing business to the Elbow Lake Airport. They've since gone to a paved runway, and I think Joe has, I know he has at least two. He might even have a third hangar. So how does that affect things? Well, now Joe's employing people at the Elbow Lake Airport, and so there's an economic benefit to the community, and it's a wonderful thing for the health of the airport and the aviation community in that area. But they didn't see Joe coming. He showed up and they were able to accommodate him. In your minimum standards, you have to, I think, just my opinion, you don't have to. I think it's best if you try and address as many different services as possible. That way, you're prepared for when someone comes in. And at the same time, you're able to say no if the service is inappropriate for your airport because you have it in your standards. How are minimum standards adopted? Minimum standards are like zoning. They're a local thing. So you use whatever process the airport sponsor has. So many times the airport board will do the work of working with the language. If you don't have an airport board, it can be the airport manager. And MnDOT Aeronautics is always happy to help with getting the language. We've helped with getting started with the language. We help with reviewing the language. But in the end, it's the airport's language. So you want to make sure you have a legal review of it. It shouldn't take all that much time to do the review, and then you adopt it by whatever process you use. You can you adopt all kinds of requirement standards for your city, winter parking rules, conditional use permits. This would be another one of those things. And then somebody has to enforce it, and that is normally the airport manager who enforces the minimum standards. There is a correlation to MnDOT commercial operations. MnDOT has rules and statutes concerning commercial operations. And so, you know, you want to make sure that your minimum standards refer to that. You can refer to that. We'd like to see hand in glove the airport standards and the state standards work together. If I come across a commercial operator who is not complying with our standards and I'm having difficulty with that, one of the first places I turn is to the airport sponsor to say, I'm having trouble with this individual. They're not in compliance with our standards. And can you assist me with that? So having our standards, reference to our standards in your minimum standards is a good thing. The FAA also has requirements. So similarly adding language to ensure that people are complying with the FAA regulations is also a good idea. UAS operations, unmanned aerial systems, I guess is the S. It goes by so many different names these days, but it's coming. And I see there's some sessions that ACRP, I think it's putting on. It's a national program. And so they're talking about it. The National Association of State Aviation Officials is also doing some work on integrating unmanned aircraft into airports. A lot of work going on in this area. And I'd just say it's coming. And so you should be prepared for it. And it's an aviation operation, so you can address it in both your minimum standards and also in your airport rules and regulations. While UAS operating as a commercial operation are an aviation operation and cannot be, well, you'd have to meet some requirements to say you couldn't have them on the airport. The model aircraft are not an aeronautical operation, and you can ban the use of model aircraft on the airport. That would most likely happen through a airport rules and regulations. All right, and boilerplate. So on our website, on the MnDOT website, you will find under airport manager references information about a number of different items, lots of good ones. Down at near the bottom, it says airport minimum standards, and below that airport leases and agreements. So there's help out there that's available. I believe AirTAP also has information about minimum standards and leases and things like that. And you can hit up their webpage as well. Our references when we're talking about airport minimum standards, we give you the boilerplate, but then we also give you some of the background research that we've done, things from AOPA, the Airport Cooperative Research Program, ACRP, and AirTAP. And so you can, if you want to learn more about it, you're just not about filling in the blanks and getting it done. There are the resources there to read how other people have dealt with it as well. And believe it or not, I'm done. So I'm ready for questions.
Great. Thank you, Rick. I really appreciate that. If anyone has questions, they can go ahead and unmute their phone or they can put them in the chat. Otherwise, I don't want you to put you on the spot, Rick, but you were talking about the Minnesota rules for commercial operations. Do you maybe have an example of what one of those would be, or maybe like what that will help, how it will help people start their minimum standard discussion?
Yeah, so we have rules about commercial operations, and we require licensing. And so if you are doing aircraft maintenance, you're required to have a license from us. So if you, in one of your activities that you list in your minimum standards, have aircraft maintenance as being one of the activities you're going to talk about the standards for it. You could just throw in there that they must have a commercial license from the state of Minnesota, and we require insurance for not only the operation, but for the work that they do, and we. I guess that's one of the big ones is the insurance that we require. So our having them have a license from us then provides some level of review outside of the community, and also gives you an idea of the things you might look at. So when you're looking at the insurance requirements piece, you could look at what we have as insurance requirements. I will say our insurance requirements haven't been adjusted in decades, and so they're probably pretty low. You could also talk to insurers and say, you know, what's appropriate here. And I would think most communities that the airport sponsor has other buildings that they have insurance on, and so they might have someone in the insurance industry that they could talk to about that in setting those standards.
Great, thank you. Other questions people may have?
Melissa, this is Pam Schroeder.
Hi, Pam.
Hello. I have a question regarding, Rick, you mentioned that there should be a legal review of our minimum standard draft or any lease as such. But my question would be, because I have been down this road before, that, you know, we all know that the aeronautic documents that we need to draft are, you know, very much aviation specific. Are there any particulars any particulars in the minimum standards that need to be included, which a local attorney may not be privy to, or any resources out there that maybe MnDOT uses as their aeronautics legal area for resource contact person?
Yeah, thanks, Pam, for the question. We we do have an attorney on staff, but they don't, they will not review your minimum standards for you, I'm sorry to say. The things that are in the minimum standards, again, are very much common to businesses all across the spectrum, not just aviation. If there is some aviation specifics in your minimum standards, certainly we'd be willing to talk with our inspectors would be willing to talk with your legal counsel when they're doing the review if they have questions. And so we can certainly help the legal counsel to understand the aviation side of it, but the minimum standards, the legal review has to happen on a local level.
Okay, thank you. So otherwise, we could contact you so that you can point us in the right direction of that area.
As long as you do it before April 30th.
All right, thank you.
It's not that this presentation, you're not getting a kind of a warranty period with the presentation. It's that I expire on April 30th.
Thanks, Pam. Are there other questions out there? Okay, well, Catherine, I think I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, well, again, I did put in the link an evaluation link. So if you're able to complete that, that's really great. It's really helpful for us to plan future trainings so we can better serve your needs in the coming year. So, well, thank you so much, Rick. It was a pleasure having you do one of our last of the series trainings before you retire next week. We really appreciate everything you've done, not only for the Minnesota AirTAP, but also the aeronautics and the entire community of Minnesota, and all your years of service. So thank you so much. And Melissa, thank you for moderating the session. Again, all of our other sessions are on our website. We have 2 more coming up. Next week, we have an Airlights one on the Tuesday, and then Understanding Lease Agreements is the following Thursday on May 6th. So we have 2 more opportunities. And again, everyone, thank you so much for attending today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.